It's beautiful music. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to go right into the next roundtable. But before we bring our panel together to talk about fintech in Vietnam, I thought I'd give a bit of an introduction to what's happening in fintech here so that you have a little bit of a background. So I think maybe many of you are aware that there is a revolution going on in financial services worldwide. And probably the places where it's happening most rapidly are China, the United States, but even in our own region, we see a huge amount of activity in Singapore, as well as in Australia. And we're talking about financial technology. So a lot of this is driven by startups. So that's one of our themes today, is to talk about startups. But I think when we look at financial technology and what's happening in the world, we see a couple of dynamics that are happening in many different countries and also happening in Vietnam. One of them is that the startups are faced with large existing financial service providers like commercial banks, the so-called incumbents, and those are often become very big obstacles for the startups to develop their business models. But at the same time, a lot of these incumbents actually need the financial technology, and they actually need the energy and the ideas that are coming from the startups. So it's a bit of an interesting proposition that we see across these different markets, and we're starting to see also in Vietnam. The other thing, and I think Eddie mentioned this, it's very important to note that when you start to think about innovation and startups, there's a very interesting dynamic related to financial services. It's a regulated industry. And it's a regulated industry for a reason, and that there are implications to that. So the regulator has a huge responsibility. They have the responsibility to protect you, the consumer, as well as the responsibility to protect the system. But interestingly, now we see that the financial regulators in many of these markets, they have a new role. They also have to facilitate innovation. And this is a very difficult role, often, for financial regulators who are used to making rules and maybe they're not used to promoting innovation or nurturing startups, so they have to learn some new behaviors. So I want to talk a little bit about, in Vietnam, the main regulator, of course, is the State Bank of Vietnam. So I'll tell you that maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago, they hadn't thought very much about fintech. But now they actually are thinking about it all the time. So they've created a steering committee, they have a working group, they have a dedicated team that's thinking about how to facilitate fintech. And we, MBI, we're actually working with them on that. It's been part of our program, is to raise awareness among regulators. But it's not just about regulation, because you could have the best regulations in the world, but you wouldn't have financial technology happening. You need some other things. You need startups. You need quality startups. And you need the ecosystem that nurtures the startups, as well as the regulation. So we actually took a look at the fintech ecosystem in Vietnam. We did a mapping of the fintech ecosystem in Vietnam. And I'm going to introduce the gentleman who did that mapping for us. So when we were looking for someone to analyze what's happening in fintech in Vietnam, we had a very good candidate at hand, a gentleman who actually has been running the FinTech Meetup Vietnam. He's the founder of the FinTech Meetup Vietnam, which means that he's actually literally part of the ecosystem for fintech in the country. He's also the man behind FinTech News Singapore. I don't know if you get this news feed, but we're talking about what you read. If you want to be abreast of what's happening in fintech, you should read Deal Street Asia, and you should read FinTech News Singapore, among other things. And then finally, he's been a resident in Vietnam for 3 years. and his name is Christian Koenig, and I'm going to turn the microphone over to Christian to walk us through the Vietnam fintech mapping program that we did.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, as Tom said, I'm here since 3 years. I came to consult a fintech startup in Vietnam, and actually forget about this, there are two figures which I should have known before. The first one is what Eddie said, how much time you guys spending on video. And the second one, how much time you guys spending on Facebook. Because I had to lead a team of 12 girls, all around 24 years old, which was quite challenging. And I used to lead teams in investment banks, but this was my hardest challenge ever. So I want to ask here now the audience, how many of you guys don't have a bank account or you get the cash end of month, like not to your bank? How many here? So you're all really nobody. But this is actually what it is. I mean, you guys are on social media network, you're on search, on music, on video. But on banking, it's a huge potential, as you can see here. What I did, by order of the Asian Development Bank, I tried to analyze and I tried to find all the fintech startups in Vietnam, which is actually tricky because you guys don't speak. So it's very, very hard. So I was searching and searching, and I'm quite used to, I'm in fintech since 2005. And we found quite a few, but first of all, the highlights. I mean, what we did, like in 2014, we founded the fintech Vietnam, because I was working for a fintech company, but even this fintech company did not know what fintech is. So I was thinking we had to bring together the people to say what fintech is. So I founded the fintech meetup Vietnam. We're doing meetups in Ho Chi Minh City and in Hanoi. What we had also, other highlights, we did the first fintech Vietnam startup report 2 years ago, which had, until now, like 50,000 views on SlideShares, which gave us a first overview of what is going on. And then more and more things going on. I mean, Timo, the first digital bank in Vietnam, was founded. So I want to ask here, who has a Timo account here? At least 2 hands, okay? There's a lot to do, 3 hands, okay? At least you guys have a Timo account, okay? It's the first digital. You can go to a coffee shop, and in a coffee shop, you can open a bank account. So no more queuing, very cool. Why you don't guys have no Timo account? I think there's no one in Da Nang, but if you're in Ho Chi Minh City or in Hanoi, please open a Timo account, and you can get on the ATM for free money. And then there was this huge funding of Momo, which is a digital wallet. They get $28 million from Goldman Sachs and other investors. So who is using Momo here? Still a lot to do, huh? But okay, at least they got 28 million funding. And there were some other things going on. So there's at least some funding. Also OnPay gets some fundings. This one Tom already mentioned. And this is now our mapping, okay? So after searching and searching, and I even used Vietnamese, we found this is our fintech Vietnam startup map. What you can see here, everybody is in payment or in mobile payment, which is quite shocking, because this is what's happening in other markets first, okay? If you're looking in other fintech markets, everybody went to mobile payment first, which is obviously wrong, because how many apps are you using? Maybe 5, maybe 6. So it's hard to say if we really need 10 or 50 mobile payment providers. Of course, we also find a couple of others in personal finance, in lending, and all the stuff. I get contacted a lot by investors, and they're coming to me like big conglomerates from Korea and say, Christian, we want to invest in fintech in Vietnam. So there's a lot of demand here. But honestly, I can tell you, there is not yet much to invest, okay? However, the future is really, really great. But still, there are not many fintech startups here. Because if you don't speak, if I don't find out that you guys having a fintech startup here in Vietnam, probably also your clients will not find out. So, one thing about mobile payment. If you're lucky, you will compete with the banks or with the telcos. This is the lucky point, okay? Because they're slow in adoption, they're slow. If you're unlucky, you're going to compete with the tech giants like Facebook, Alibaba, WeChat, okay? So this is what happens now. Like all the mobile payment providers, they may run out of money. The banks are watching, they're watching, but also these guys, if they come in, they will have the marketing power. So mobile payment is probably not the market to be. What we also find out, there are not zero startups now in wealth tech, in robo-advisory, in insurtech. There is nothing there, and there I see huge potential. Another things in a market like Vietnam, where I would see a huge potential is B2B instead of B2C. B2B means going to solve a problem. For example, solve a problem for a banks. This is, for example, what Trusting Social is doing. They're solving a problem of a bank because they have a problem in credit risk management, okay? However, in all these startups we saw before, we don't see much in B2B. Everybody want to go B2C. I agree, it's a huge market, 90 million people here. Indonesia, 300 million people, okay? However, now you need to think which problem you're going to solve, okay? And B2B has, in the short term, much more potential. This is a bit like the ecosystem, so we try to see who doing something in innovation, who has an innovation lab, who are the accelerators, who try to invest in fintechs, who are the meetups, the conferences, and who is doing some cooperation. And actually, this is a big part. This is the cooperation map between banks and startups in Germany, okay? Germany also about 90 million people. I cannot count all of them, but you can see there is huge cooperation between banks and fintech startups. And this is actually what is missing here in Vietnam. We don't have a lot of cooperation. A lot of this stuff might be connected to trust or whatever. But if you want to be successful now, we need to speak about cooperation. And cooperation also means working together, for example, with big financial institutions, okay? And this is what fintech should be about. And this is what I saw is missing, okay? If we speak about trust, this is another issue, okay? When my girlfriend opened a Timo account, I gave her some money to put into ATM of the Timo account, 2 million. First, she put 1 million inside. Then I asked her, why you only put 1 million inside? So I don't trust this machine, okay? And then she put the 2nd million inside. Of course, I know there's a huge trust issue. Also, my team, when I had here, like, they were 24 years old. They're all on Facebook. And I asked them, do you have an online banking account? They don't. So as I see there is a huge potential here, but what we have to speak here, we have to speak about collaboration, working together, and we have to really solve a problem. And of course, a mobile payment is a big market. There will be a huge potential here, but I'm so sure all you guys here probably don't use all these mobile payment providers here, okay? But you might will in the future, but now what is cash is king. I mean, even when I try to order some shoes online here, e-commerce, okay? And yeah, I said 42 is my shoe number. And finally, it arrived completely wrong. But I was really happy I could pay by cash, okay? So it's a huge potential also in this. As part of this, we did also an infographic. You can find them on our webpage, where you see all the numbers, also the graphics. And this is it. If there are any information, we did a webpage for you guys, fintech/vietnam.com. You can find all the information if you want to see how Tom looks like without a beard. It's this one. And yeah, now we go to the panel. If you guys have any questions, please email me, whatever, chat with me on Facebook. I'm happy to answer all the questions about Vietnam. I'm really, really, really bullish on fintech in Vietnam, okay? However, if we go into fintech Vietnam, okay, we have to do it right, okay? And we can learn from other markets and doing it better. Thanks a lot.
Good job. Good job. I think we don't need this now, huh? Okay. Okay, he's going to introduce it.
Hello, hello. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Christian, for that. Let's jump right back into the roundtables. Like Christian was saying, there is a wave to catch. There's a lot of potential. So let's catch the wave. Let's hear from our experts who are sharing more about the state of Vietnam's fintech industry in the upcoming roundtable discussion. Please welcome our moderator, Mr. Quang Phan, Deputy Director of MBI, and joining the discussion, we are pleased to introduce Mr. Tran Thanh Nam, CEO at Moca Mobile Payments, Ms. Nicole Nguyen, Head of Corporate Marketing at Infinity Blockchain Labs, and Mr. Tran Hu Duc, the Director of FPT Ventures. Welcome. I hope I got the names correctly there, but welcome them.
kia được, Đức ở đây.
Okay. Đức. Okay.
Thank you, Đức and Nicole and Nam. And let me start by allowing each of you like 3 minutes to talk about what the problem you are solving and your experience so far with your venture here. I think we have a great minds in fintech in the room now. Let me start with Mr. Nam, Moca. 3 minutes of advertising.
Okay. I think I'm solving the wrong problem. As it's just heard, Christian, we're doing mobile payment, which is the wrong thing to do. Moca is for general purpose, everyday retail consumptions, and money transfer. Should we speak in Vietnamese or English?
I don't know. I mean, maybe English is easier because I noticed that nobody have a headset on in the last session. So why don't we go with English then?
Okay. Let me try.
If you feel more comfortable in Vietnamese, that's fine too.
Okay. It's actually Cambodian, but okay, so try English. So we do mobile payment. We've been in operation for nearly 4 years. We have partnership with 7 banks live. And this is something probably we haven't spoken about too much, so Christian didn't find out. We launched live services with Vietcombank just last Monday this week, after nearly 3 years of working with them. So mobile payment, partnering with bank, what does it mean? We provide a mobile app to consumers so that they can link their payment cards issued by the banks. So instead of the cards that you can only swipe at the POS or withdraw cash at the ATM, you can provide a linkage between the card and the mobile app and pay at many other locations without without using your plastic card and without a POS terminals. So if you guys are interested in mobile payment and look at success stories around the world, then obviously you probably would have known Alipay and WeChat Pay. And in a way, I think we are a very early version and of course much smaller in terms of penetration than Alipay or WeChat Pay, but in very much similar way. So mobile app, linking a payment cards, pay to some seller by scanning the QR code. So that is something that probably most of you would probably be familiar now. And that's the main product feature and that's the main usage. Apart from the 7 banks, we have about over 3,000 acceptance points in the country, mostly in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh, online, store on the street, and even taxi running on the roads. You can pay using the Moca app and an ATM card linked to the app. Doesn't have to be Visa or MasterCard. Obviously, it works with Visa and MasterCard. We do support the e-wallet. You can deposit money into a Moca e-wallet and pay using the app. We don't promote it yet. We don't spend marketing money on the e-wallet because we want to focus on the cards first. So maybe that's just the beginning.
It is faster or cheaper, or what's the values? I mean, it is faster or cheaper than using plastic?
So now, compared...
why people have to use it?
Right. Recently, I spoke with Báo Đầu Tư, so an investment newspaper, and I call, and they use this as for the title, I call cash as our competitor. So we compete against cash mostly, but of course we can compare ourselves against plastic cards. Now, against plastic card, compare with a plastic card, there are 2 major differences and advantages. First of all, we don't require a POS terminals on the merchant side. So you don't have to spend $200 to $500 per terminal for an acceptance point. And that has been one of the biggest hurdles in this country for the last 20 years since the first bank tried to install POS terminal, I think it's around 1995. There have only been over 200,000 POS terminals in this country for a very large population, a very large retail market. And you will most often find that POS terminals sit together at a single point. So you don't get a widespread adoption because you can't invest in enough terminals. So the first difference is compared to plastic cards, Moca with the QR code on the merchant side eliminate the need for the terminals, and that enable it to potentially spread throughout the country without cost. The second major difference is security. Most of the situation where you lose your card information and therefore might lose your money is that you key in your card information onto some website or hand over your plastic card at the counter, and you end up losing your card information. And people create fake card and take your money. Now with Moca mobile payment, you don't show your plastic card anymore. After linking it with the app, you use the app, and the card information is never shared with the seller, wherever they are, whether online or on the street.
Okay, can we move to Nicole Nguyen? So Nicole is the blockchain or Bitcoin sort of ladies in Vietnam. So can you say a little bit about sort of the problem you're solving here and also overseas with your company and startup? 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to be very short. So hello, Da Nang, and hi, everyone. So my name is Nicole, and I'm talking on behalf of Infinity Blockchain Labs, which is, I think, similarly the only blockchain startup in Vietnam at the moment. Well, let's say there are a couple of them, but let's say we are among the most active blockchain startups in Vietnam. So let's say our proposition is a bit different from other fintech companies in Vietnam because basically you might have heard about blockchain. So it's the backbone of a lot of technologies other than fintech. So we are solving the trust issue for the parties when they do partnership, when they collaborate to do business. So pretty much fintech is one area where blockchain might bring some disruptions, but then we are also talking about some possible, let's say, convergence between blockchain and Internet of Things or artificial intelligence to bring about a trustless platform for people to do business and to minimize cost and transaction friction. So that's basically, that's the idea about what our company is doing at the moment. We are now finding our partner in Vietnam, fortunately, or might be also an unfortunate thing because at the moment our clients are mostly based abroad. And at the moment we are now working with the State Bank of Vietnam, with the Vietnam FinTech Club, with a lot of players to gain trust from them. And from then on, we can bring something more, let's say, pragmatic about blockchain applications in Vietnam. Other than that, we are also, let's say we are the ecosystem builder of blockchain in Vietnam. So we are doing various areas to start this, to develop this blockchain ecosystem from scratch. So we are doing training, we are doing monthly education workshop, we are doing community development. Also, we are doing regulation, let's say, advocacy with the State Bank of Vietnam on blockchain. So pretty much we are on a different, let's say, proposition, but at the same time, we are also thrilled to see how blockchain and fintech is now also taking off in Vietnam in the future.
Yeah, thank you. I hope one day you can play here in Vietnam legally. I think it's a typical, very unusual that a startup in Vietnam actually serve the overseas market and not so much the local market. And I think it's pretty much also the situation for a lot of the other fintechs now. Some of them still have to operate in the sort of what I call shadow economy. Hopefully we can work together and then everybody can play sort of in a more transparent environment. So with that, I want to move to Mr. Đức. Mr. Đức is not just an investor, but he's a fintech sort of enthusiast or like supporters. He's been working on setting up the fintech club and the chair of the fintech club for several years. And Đức, can you share with us your views on sort of what are you working on, both from an investment side and as well as sort of your in-kind or your CSR work in the setting up the fintech club? Yeah.
Yep. So I think that firstly I would like to thank Mr. MBI and Quang to invite me to present here. I think that it's like a long day already, right? So I think that you guys been here because you're interested in the fintech. So I think that to increase more interactive between you and us. So I suggest that if you guys have any question, then you just raise your hand, and I think that we will be very open to answer all of your questions regarding to the fintech. So regarding about me, then I mostly the venture capitalist. So I run the equity ventures. So we investing in the Visa, one of the accelerator that Adrian just said you guys about. And the other things like we investing in a startup who has the strategic goal with FPT. So we operating the fund for 2 years already, and we invested in 4 deals. two regarding to the advertising, one for security, and another is regarding to the education business. And during the time that I want to find out like the very big chance, in like 5 or 10 years, and I do many analysis on which area that I should focus in, because you know that before FT Venture, then you already have like several VC firms in Vietnam, and I found out that fintech will be one of the very potential industry, yes, that I should look in. So I started the Facebook group 2 years ago together with Mr. Diệp from Momo, like sponsored by Dragon Capital and Standard Chartered Bank. So we run this kind of like Facebook group to gather the interests, people who are interested in the fintechs. And after 2 years, we like mostly post the article relating to the fintech and have like some small group discussing some ideas. But recently, then we see there's a need that it should be like legalized and become like more structures to guarantee the success for the club. Because you know that in Vietnam, then like Mr. Quang said, that is the shadow economy. If you open a club like in the freestyle in the Facebook, actually you are not allowed to do anything, except post on the Facebook. You do not allow to organize any event, do not allow to like writing any article officially, do not want to raise the voice for the like policy makers. So I think we pretty have like lucky that the government do support for us. So we talk with State Bank of Vietnam, we talk with Vietnam Banking Associations. So they are very supportive for the Vietnam FinTech Club, and they suggest us to like legalize it and then become one of the member for the Vietnam Banking Association. I think that through those kind of vehicle, we can have a channel for the fintech startup to work with the government. But what we believe, I think that we say with the Chris have just said that in Vietnam, and I think also in the other emerging market also, the fintech, you cannot become a bank, but the bank, they can easily beat you, right? They can kill you as a fintech startup. So we should be aware of those kind of pictures. We should not adopt like from some slogan from US guy that fintech is a disruptor and the bank will be like obsolete and bank only a platform and we are the heroes of the future. Those kind of things is like very inspiring, but it's not the truth for the Vietnam's context. So many things that you can be beaten not only by the banks but the legal things also. So the good strategy, I think, for the club is like to become a bridge between the fintech startup and the banks and also the lawmaker. So I encourage you guys, if you're interested in the fintech, then you can come to the Facebook and join us on the search Vietnam FinTech, and join us on the group. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I want to relax a little bit. Before I ask the next question, may I ask you all sort of fill up the glass and just drinks? And the question I want to ask is, what's the challenge you have in sort of starting the fintech business here? And what's the potential of that as well? And I want you to drink the water, but you leave a little bit of water at your glasses at the end, because the last question's going to be, what's your view about the fintech in Vietnam, whether it's half full or half empty? And let's start with the challenges and the opportunities of fintechs here in Vietnam. So why don't we start with Nicole? You say that you cannot operate here sort of legally and you have to serve overseas market. So what's the challenges in serving overseas market and don't have your sort of business here in Vietnam yet?
I would take it as maybe an opportunity. So it depends on how we look at it. I mean, at the moment, obviously in blockchain, Vietnam is still quite lagging behind. And it's not only about, like the lack of, let's say, regulatory pathway or framework, but it's also more about the mindset of the people. So let's say if we cannot solve, ironically, the same problem that blockchain wants to solve, it's trust. If we don't solve trust, well, let's echo, let's say, Christian's point. If we cannot solve this problem of trust, then definitely it's going to be even more challenging for fintech startups to thrive. And I mean, the banks have been there for decades for multiple reasons, and one of the reasons is the trust. And definitely for fintech, whenever you bring like a new technology or a new business or product portfolio to the table, there's always like, at first people would just like, kind of resist the idea. And as long as you can prove that you are doing something better or you are serving a niche market better than the banks or your competitors, then that's when you can really make the difference. Otherwise, as Anh said, I think, well, we can just be crushed at a fingertip of the banks. So pretty much, I mean, at the moment, we see that the opportunity amass. So we are doing a lot of, other clients in other countries. So we are having two key products. So one product is a set of, let's say, digital asset management, involving like a wallet and a marketplace for you to trade and manage your digital assets. And another product is an identity platform on blockchain, allowing, this acts as a threshold for people to prove their identity when they want to do transaction or business online or with other clients. And pretty much with these two products, to be honest, we also have problem finding the place where we can register the business, because it doesn't mean that every single country in the world does accept this new technology. Even in the US, they have different kind of regulation in different states or different areas where, let's say, Bitcoin or blockchain, is recognized or is legalized. So pretty much we have to choose the place where we can register the business. We have to choose the place where we can gain most credibility from the license in there to do business. And last but not least, we have to bring that technology back to Vietnam, the application back to Vietnam, and see which vertical might be my best fit with that product. And at the moment, I mean, with the two products, we have finished the license and the credibility in other countries. But then at the moment, with the vertical in Vietnam, pretty much we are now finding some specific use case or some specific vertical where we can really apply this technology. And as I mentioned, we also need to prove that this is like a niche market that we can serve better than the traditional players. So that's also very important. So what we are bringing to the table is not about getting, or let's say stealing the pies or their shares. We are trying to expand the cake, or like the market share, so that everyone has something in there. And also, as I mentioned before, the thing is that at the moment in Vietnam, there's no kind of ecosystem for blockchain. I think for fintech at the moment, still like we are working on that as well. And I believe that, I mean, in various like, let's say startup hubs in the world, like in Silicon Valley or so, if you don't have like an education institute, like a world-class education institution in the middle, definitely it's going to be very hard to facilitate all the activities around that ecosystem. So what we are doing at the moment is that we are building our own ecosystem by doing the training to, let's say, to develop the tech talents. We are doing all of the surrounding activities of advocacy, of community, of business development, collaboration, and so. But we just want to make sure that with a, let's say, with the foundation, setting up the right foundation from the beginning, we are trying to do the business in the legitimate way, and we want to work with all the stakeholders. We want to involve all the stakeholders in this journey, so as not to be like the lone rider in all this kind of revolution. So yeah.
So why you started in Vietnam then? I mean, if you don't have a market here, so what's the attraction for you to do business here, to start it here?
Yeah, I think
the talent, whatever.
Yeah, I think the key motivation for my company's founder is the tech talent in Vietnam. So he just started from. He believes in the huge pool of tech talents in Vietnam, And he's also mentioned, of course, as you all know, Vietnam is one of the most stable, like let's say in terms of socio-economic stability, Vietnam is also like, very high in the global rank.
In other words, it's sort of Vietnamese engineer of sort of like global world quality standard that can solve the cutting edge technologies.
And the price competition, price competitiveness as well.
Yeah, okay. Can we move to Nam? Can you share your experience so far, the challenges and the opportunities?
Definitely the opportunities are interesting, right? In fintech in general, not just in payment where we operate. But let me share quickly on the challenges, because I think we might have different views. Nicole mentioned that the tech talent is one of the advantage, and that's why her company starts here. For us, actually, the lack of quality human resources is one of the biggest challenges in actually rolling out and implementing solution, trying to get market penetration. The lack of resources, quality resources, is actually very painful. And in fintech, it's more severe than in other segments for a couple of reasons. To do fintech, I think the requirement for expertise is relatively high. It's technology for very sensitive stuff, money and payment and lending and so on. And it's highly regulated. So you need to be very precise and need to be very controlled and proper and compliant with all sort of standards and regulations. So that's one reason. But at the opposite end, you compete against big guys for resources. Now, to get people to work with us in our fintech startup, actually we have to pull people out from the banks, from the big tech companies. And we lose people to those guys as well. So actually it's more severe than in others. For example, gaming startup probably would have a slightly easier time getting quality staff than in fintech. So that's one of the biggest challenges we face. Obviously, regulation, everyone probably would agree on regulation being one of the challenges. For payment, it's not too bad, but for fintech in general, I think it's still, there's a lot of improvement to be done, and obviously MBI is assisting the State Bank of Vietnam doing that. But let me just pick one example, right? Beside mobile payment, which we are in and might be wrong, the greatest need and the greatest opportunity for fintech is in lending. And everyone talk about, for example, crowdfunding or peer-to-peer lending. And there, in those verticals, regulation or the lack of it is one of the largest challenges that anyone who wants to operate in that space would face. Then obviously the consumer and the market mindset and habit is the other biggest challenge. For lending, the issue of trust might come into the picture, where you need to build a mechanism where you have high level of trust before people can start lending to each other or borrowing from each other. For payment, the habit of cash is one of the biggest challenges, right? So overall, I think regulation, lack of human resources, and the consumer habit and the market practices are the biggest challenges.
Thank you. So you work both on building the market and educating the regulators to make it easier for you guys to...
Yes, so let me actually share my own personal experience in that space. I started with fintech in Vietnam more than 10 years ago with MobiV, the first e-payment service provider being licensed by the State Bank of Vietnam. I was a co-founder there in July 2007, so actually it's exactly 10 years ago, after I left Microsoft in the US, and we worked with the State Bank of Vietnam. At the time, there was no regulation to issue payment licenses. So we worked with them for a year, and we tried to explain to them and show them references from other markets that you can issue a license or you can allow this kind of operation to happen, and those would still be under your control. So in the end, we were able to convince the State Bank of Vietnam to issue a provisional license. There was no documents for there's no procedure for issuing a license.
If you don't have the license, nobody's going to trust you.
Right. So, and obviously, if you want to be not in the shadow economy or the black market, you want to be formally regulated. And when they don't have the regulation to regulate you, you work with them to guide them toward a point where they find that, okay, we can accept for you to pilot. And that's what provisional license means. You can pilot, and we need to be renewed every year. In the end, I think there was about 9 provisional license issued over the 7 years from 2008 to 2015. And only then the State Bank of Vietnam have a formal regulation to issue proper license. And Moca obviously now have a proper license, but in the past we have to work with the State Bank of Vietnam to overcome the issue with regulation. So that's, I think, is something that maybe blockchain players and peer-to-peer lending or other credit fintech players should consider doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good lesson from Nam. Maybe a blockchain group can sort of learn some from that. And actually, I want to go back to an issue Mr. Duc raised earlier about the disruption or the collaboration between the little fintechs against the big Goliaths, the banks, and the other more established financial institutions. I mean, how you see it? Do you see like a potential disruptions or a potential huge sort of collaborations on both sides? And what's the potential here in Vietnam?
So I think before I answer Quang question, then I want to continue on the topic, very interesting topic about the challenges in Vietnam, especially in the fintech. I think that you know that for the startup, it is like you do a new thing. So when you do a new thing, then for sure, then there's usually no law on that. So that's why the regulation is already there, right? But for the fintech, it is like more dangerous because it is very easy for you to be like to force to go to the prison because of the like things related to money, right? If you like take money from someone illegally, then easily you get into the prison. So that's why people are now, I think that very carefully on the regulation. However, I think that we should not avoid that the nature of the startup. So for the startup, it is like doing the new things, the new concepts. That no law about that. If we wait for the government to settle some kind of like regulation on that, then I am afraid that it then will become more difficult. That is the lesson that we learned from the startup in general. At the beginning, we also claimed that we have no law on the startup, no law on the VC, right? How to register VC, how to raise fund, etc. Right? And then the government, they set like many people, many task force to design a law. And then we reading the draft version of the law, we say that, hey, stop doing that. But then if they issue those laws, then we cannot do anything. But they force you to have like some cap condition to investing in the startup. So I think it's the same worry if we waiting for the government to issue the regulation. So I encouraging the founder to be like brave enough, then just go ahead. Yeah. I think that's like Mr. Nam before then, he's entered in Vietnam from US with very clear mind, and you do not nervous, then you start MobiV, and that's why we have the payment system today. Mr. Thang from VNB also shared me those story. Because of that. So we need to have, I think, the braveness. And from our role as a like investor and the intermediary vehicle, and we also want to support for that through like setting up the Vietnam FinTech Club. So through those kind of like intermediary vehicle, then we have like some voice to protect for the startup. But that's what my expectation on those kind of things. Coming back to the like opportunities with the bank or traditional financial institution, I think there's a lot, because you know that in Vietnam, I read a report that 80% is like still unbanked, right? And with the current system of the bank in Vietnam, then you see they cannot. It's too costly for them to reach to the like big amount of people. It's very costly. Then you need to open the physical branch every province. It is very, very different from China. I met a China fintech guys come to Vietnam 2 months ago, and he said to me that in China, then you can find every like bank branch in every corner of the street, even in very far place. So that's different in Vietnam. We do not have that system. So it is an opportunity for the fintech to come and to I think to be joined with the bank and solve the problem. And it is a win-win situation. That's my point of view.
Yeah. So you don't see so much sort of disruptions in the financial sectors. I think, can Nam and Nicole share your view as well? You see any potential big disruption, or you see more opportunity for collaboration?
I think that if you use your technology and you can cover the large amount of user. Right. Yeah. Okay. In a normal way. Yeah. For example, like for the KYC, for example, then you cannot digital KYC. Everyone need a mobile phone and can have a bank. Have like disrupted. Yeah.
I think I might reflect like Anh Nam's point. So lending and like the value-added services on payment would definitely bloom if we can solve these kind of challenges that we are having. And I think there's also one more important thing about like one of the, let's say, the challenge to let's say escalating the fintech in Vietnam. It also has something to do with the banking infrastructure as well. And at the moment, as I understand, then basically for all fintech services, you still have to tie your services with a bank account, pretty much. And until the interbank infrastructure is solved, until we have like an improved and let's say banking infrastructure, banking interface with among all the commercial banks, I definitely believe that our fintech startups are going to be thriving much faster at compared to now, because basically the thing right now, I mean, let's say the bottleneck is not only about regulation, or it's not only about like we don't have any innovation or we don't have enough innovative concepts. It's more about the infrastructure that we are using to realize those innovations. So let's say if we can ensure that infrastructure problem is solved, I do believe that the fintech can definitely blossom, can definitely flourish.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I think currently there are lots of opportunity for partnership, for cooperation, and in fact, Moca's our own view is that we focus initially on being collaborative rather than being disruptive. But I think, of course, there are also opportunity for disruption and innovation that go beyond the boundary of what banks can do or are willing to do. So let me give two examples of one example of each. For collaboration, for example, for payment, what we do for people on the street or just outside of the ecosystem, not in the domain, they might just simply see that, okay, instead of cash and plastic card, now I can use my mobile, and that's great. But going deeper into the problem of the domain, you'll see that actually is a huge partnership opportunity for players like Moca and banks. So when I go to the banks and present to them what we want to do with them, we can illustrate, we can demonstrate to them that, hey, cash is a big problem not only for the consumer. Actually, it's not a problem for the consumer. It's a biggest problem for the banks. Yeah. Now, banks have trillions of dong in cash, lying dead in the ATM, in the cash vault, and they are paying interest rates on those and not getting any interest because they cannot lend out cash. Cash is just lying there dead. So in the bank, cash is dead money. And there's a lot of cost related to cash to the bank, and actually it runs into the trillions of dong for the commercial banking system in the country every year. So when we can present to bank that, hey, with mobile payment, we use the cards and the account you already make investment in, and we can, for example, aim to reduce 10% of cash withdrawal at the ATM over 3 years' time in our partnership with you. Because we can increase non-cash payment, and therefore the need for cash withdrawal goes down. 10% reduction in cash vault holding in the bank overnight would represent literally billions of dollars of profit without any risk. So that's a kind of potential partnership and the value even for the banks. And we've been able to convince lots of banks to partner with us that's one of the reasons. But of course, disruption is also possible. And I think that might be more in the area of blockchain, for example, but more close to everyone's understanding is probably lending. So now if peer-to-peer lending can be legalized and regulated and does not require the bank to play a role, then that is clearly a potential for disruption where you can have credit and lending happening in the economy without having to depend on the banking systems, at least at the retail level. Yeah. Right? So that I think is a potential. But for now, I think especially in Vietnam, because of the appetite of the regulators, because of the roles, the historical roles that the banks are playing, and also there's a significant tendency of people being more and more banked. Obviously, there's still a lot of unbanked population, but you see the rate of people having bank account increase every year fairly quickly. And I think it was your question or Christian's question before. Nobody in this room doesn't receive salary into a bank account, right? So of course, this is a special crowd. But I think if you look broadly, the rate of people having banks are increasing fairly quickly. Yeah. So partnering with banks to support those common customers is something that is quite natural. You don't have to disrupt to be innovative. You have opportunity to collaborate, and you can also have opportunity to disrupt.
Yeah, I think I share your views. I think there's more room for collaborations. I don't think the story of Ubers and Grab taxis going to repeat in the financial sectors. and I mean, first, we don't have there's a lot of room for collaboration, and there's regulation right there. And but actually, the threats might not come from the local, fintech player, but sort of down the line, there's global fintech players that may come. It could be like Uber or something. Do you see a potential for disruption from global player coming in? Let's say Alipay or Apple Pays or those kind of things. Nowadays, sort of cross-border delivery of financial services is becoming a reality. Yeah, do you see anything from that? And what should be the reaction or the preparation on the Vietnamese side, both on the bank side and also on the fintech side and the regulator side? Not just to prepare ourselves for internal competition, but how to integrate and take advantage of that. It's not an in-country game, but sort of an global game here.
Let me take the question quickly, and then I think we should hear from my other panelists. Obviously, disruption from foreign players is one of the real possibility and real threat, and actually it has already happened. So just one small example. I'm not sure if people realize Uber is a great company in many sense, but already violate the Vietnamese payment regulations in a big way, right? All the transaction, all the trips that you pay using a credit card actually is settled overseas. So that goes, just bypass the whole banking and payment system in the country. And that's settled by a payment service provider that is based in the Netherlands. Right? So I think the State Bank of Vietnam should do better than that, should ask Uber to be more collaborative and more compliant. And I think in the near future that might happen. So foreign players, not only in the fintech space, and in the example of Uber, it's not really a fintech player, but has some impact on the fintech or payment or financial services in general, could be disruptive. And your hint at the example of Alipay, Apple Pay, obviously they will come to Vietnam. And I think to the general public, just like Uber and Grab, that's going to be good for them because they might bring along better services and better discounts and promotion and so on. So that's in many ways is a great thing. But I think in terms of being ready so that we can be more competitive, I think the regulator should at least be completely fair, both on the local, whether that's banks or fintech, and the foreigners. For example, Uber and Grab is a classic example, right? Taxi companies, I think they have a point in complaining that we have to be more compliant and we have to pay more than Uber and Grab. Obviously, the technology is great, but then other than that, there should be an even playing field. So that's from a regulator perspective. From a banks and fintech perspective, I think obviously we have to clean up our acts. We need to improve ourselves. There's no prevention. There's no technical barrier that we can rely on being erected to prevent the foreign players coming in, right? We can hope for that, but I don't think we can depend on that. So if Alipay comes, how do we react? How do we compete? Well, hopefully if we have more banks who partner with us and more acceptance point already in the ground, and users are already using it every day, then we feel we should be okay. So I think foreigners coming in is just a normal thing in today's world, right? Being disruptive, they might bring in technology or business model. Just in the Uber case, is a business model change. And that might be more disruptive to overall ecosystem and society, not just to a single player, like a taxi company or fintech. So for example, Alipay, behind that is Alibaba and Ant Financial and even a bank. Now, so imagine if they can come in and do lending and can do everything on the internet, just like Uber has done the payment just across the border without any control, then I think that's going to be a big threat and that's going to be a huge disruption. And there's a lot for the banks and the regulator to worry about. So I think we need to look at all those possibilities and try to be as ready as possible.
Change before you have to.
Okay, I think that's a very interesting question, and yeah, I mean, I think Anh now has also made some fair points about, let's say, the perspective solution to this this kind of unavoidable scenario. I think, well, definitely, I think collaboration is also the key for like the three parties of startups and banks and financial institutions and governments to really kind of increase the competitiveness in this kind of global market. I mean, well, the thing about the collaboration between banks and fintech startups, as I've mentioned before, it should be something about serving your customers better, addressing more niche markets, expanding like the whole kind of market, capacity, rather than kind of fighting for the already kind of occupied, let's say, market share. So the unbanked population is one thing, but also like, let's say, for the other categories, lending, financial services, definitely they are the areas where we can just do more collaboration, more sensible collaboration. But I think the regulators is also very important, also play a very critical role in setting like a healthy environment for that collaboration. So one of my, let's say, colleague in like Singapore, for instance, they were saying that definitely Singapore like is quite advanced in terms of fintech development. But then of course there's still like some kind of conflicting messages about how the fintech startups there are now developing. Some of them might be, let's say, they are under the pressure of, let's say, developing their services so as to improve the services for the banks, which definitely is not really the catalyst for healthy development of the fintech, ecosystem in there. So basically, I mean, that's just kind of one conflicting message, but basically that's should be avoided in Vietnam scenario. So let's say our regulators are now like taking steps, step by step, to reinforce this kind of framework. And I think it's also very important on how they can facilitate like a healthy competing environment for like banks and startups. It should be something about like forging some common ground where they can, execute their values. And last but not least, I mean, that's also a very kind of interesting question that's always posed to me when I introduce everyone about blockchain. So they always say that, wow, so blockchain is definitely great. It's a decentralized, like almost like frictionless kind of decentralized database. So what are we going to do? So other banks or other governments are going to disappear. So does it mean that all the intermediaries are going to disappear? And I mean, everyone's going to run on blockchain. So basically, I mean, yeah, that should be something like the singularity kind of far-fetched vision. So yeah, so I'm just going to be very quick. So pretty much, I think with this thing, I mean, the Uber and Airbnb approach is also very interesting. So you should think about like facilitating a platform to do business instead of kind of captivating on a certain kind of activities or services in the market. It's more about facilitating this, like for instance with Google, it's the same for Google or Facebook or any other kind of startups, when you can really facilitate like a platform approach for everyone to join, in let's say decrease the entry barriers and try to expand the market, involve more stakeholders, more players. I think that should be the way for startups, not only in fintech, but also in other areas to move forward. Yeah,
actually, I mean, through the discussion, you kind of sort of answer one of the questions I want to ask, sort of the role of the regulator here. I think now is, I mean, if people want to avoid the story of Uber and Grab and the traditional taxis, I think they should be allowing fintech companies the maximum freedoms to work with banks and sort of improve customer service and penetrate into the unbankable population now rather than later. And I think actually that comes the last question I want to ask because we're running out of time. What's your views about the fintech sort of whether the glass is half full, a third? What's the level of development now? Sort of, why don't you just finish your water or fill it with more water and just show everybody's where is it? Okay, and we're going to stop in like 2-3 minutes. Okay.
So for me, it's full. It's full.
So there's no room for development.
No, I mean it's full. As in, it's very good. You don't have to worry about the challenges. You should look at the opportunities.
What I mean is there's the room for development in the fintech area.
Obviously, but
it's a 10% full or 100% full.
No, in that sense, I think it's empty. There's a lot to be done, but don't worry about the challenges.
Okay.
Just push ahead.
Okay, so 10% full.
So I think that if it is full, then our job is like to drink it, make it be more empty. So yeah, I think that my message is that we need to take action. Right? It's not like full or empty, but we need to take action. So I drink it, so it become more empty, more room.
Okay, I think with that we want to end our session here, and thanks you very much for listening to us, and I hope it's useful for you guys. So I want to hand it back to the organizers. Thank you, Đức, and thank you Nicole and Nam. Yeah, thank you.